welcome to this afternoon session, everybody. My name is Esther Bromley. I work for Support Staffordshire, and I've been working quite hard with the supportive community teams over at Staffordshire County Council to both develop and deliver these sessions for you. First of all, I'm going to talk about communication. Obviously, whatever we do, whatever sort of role that we have in our lives, we do need to communicate well. And I've got some techniques that I'm going to talk through. Really interesting one to do communication skills sessions when really I'm not seeing you face to face. You can't practice anything. You can't do anything. However, I can at least talk you through it. And the second part of today is dealing with safeguarding concerns. So what do we need to look out for? What would we do if we were worried in any way, shape or form about somebody that we know? So communication, it's really useful to think about in the first place how we communicate, and we communicate in a variety of ways. I'll show you this slide and this figure. It's something I've used for a long time when I've been teaching communication. Because communication is actually a combination of methods, and we think automatically of either the words that we speak or we write down for somebody. However, what somebody takes in and how they perceive the way that we say things and how they interpret us is a very small part of what we are doing, the words themselves. Tone of voice is really important, and even more important are those non-verbal cues. It's body language. If you think about body language, we're actually pretty expert at interpreting body language. Even as children, we quickly learn to understand and interpret if somebody's sad, if they're happy, if they're approachable, if they're angry. We can see that very quickly. If you imagine yourself perhaps in a busy city centre, let's say pre-COVID, before we all had to keep very much our distance from each other, you're walking down a busy pavement. Maybe you're talking to somebody, maybe you're having a deep conversation. Everyone around you is milling around, everybody's going in every which way. When you think about it, what you are displaying with your body language is you are giving other people cues to which way you're going, which direction you're heading in, so they can learn to avoid you and make sure you don't bump into each other. And actually, that is pretty rare that we bump into anyone else. We may occasionally misinterpret that body language, and we do a bit of a jiggle as somebody thinks they're going that way and you think they're going the other way. But even that itself is rare. We are really, really good at interpreting body language. And for me, body language is really important for us to understand how it may be perceived well or not well. So to give you a personal example, if I'm sitting in a room, I may be having a one-to-one conversation, or it may be in a group of people. Somebody's telling me something, I'm listening quite intently, I'm taking it in, I'm processing it. My natural pose absolutely is to sit there and I cross my arms, I fold my arms, I sit back as I take it in and listen. Actually, what somebody else might be interpreting from that sort of body language is I'm closed, I'm defensive, I'm not approachable, I'm not really listening. It's very different to how I think I am showing myself or showing that interpretation. So knowing our own body language and knowing the ways that it could be misperceived is really important, and it's about us making a conscious effort of that, a conscious effort of knowing what our natural poses are, our natural body language is, and ensuring it's right and appropriate for the situation we're finding ourselves in. I have a table here, some things that you might like to think about, some ways that you might like to consider how you are when you are having these conversations. So your head, obviously being upright and straight, looking directly ahead, not lolling or looking like you're not interested. Your eyes, eye contact is so important. It's showing somebody you're really paying attention to them. You're not being distracted by looking at your watch or something else that's going on in the room. Your facial expression fitting whatever the situation is, whatever that communication is going on. Some people have nervous habits, don't they? They might laugh inappropriately or smile at the wrong time. Again, it's about having control of that. A voice being well modulated, fitting the tone of what we're saying. And if we are moving our hands and arms relaxed, moving easily, we might gesture a lot. I certainly do. But being aware again, if you are looking like you're closed, you're not approachable and you're not listening. And if we are moving, we're doing it naturally. It's measured pace. It's suitable to whatever action we're doing. So our body language is so important in the way that we show ourselves. One other way of thinking about communication is the types of questions that we can ask, and we can use different types of questions for different times and different ways of speaking to somebody. Our open questions are very much about stimulating conversation. It might be getting somebody to open up. It might be trying to explore the meaning about what somebody's saying. So they're using start with questions like who, what, why, where, when, how, describe. You're encouraging somebody to tell you more. Closed questions usually are answered with a yes or no, or it could be a factual answer, and they're great for ending a conversation. That can be difficult sometimes. Sometimes we do need to move the conversation on or bring it to a close for varied reasons, and that's one method that we can absolutely use. I want to talk about active listening. It is the first of two main techniques I'm going to talk about. I've used this quote for many, many years because I really believe in the truth of it. The biggest communication is we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. And I'm going to show you a video shortly that will demonstrate this, or at least talk about this a little bit more. But if you think about it, if you are part of a conversation and you are waiting to get in and say what you think based on your own experiences or your opinions, or you want to tell your bit of the story, or you want to give your ideas, actually you can't be properly listening to someone because you're thinking about something else. You're thinking about yourself and what you want to say. Sometimes that is necessary. We might need to phrase things delicately and in a certain way. But actually, when we're thinking about just listening to somebody, it is about being very much in the moment. And there are some ways that we can do to do that better. First of all, we're paying attention. We really are giving the speaker our full attention. We're giving them good eye contact. We're putting aside any distracting thoughts. We're not thinking about who's picking the kids up from school or what are we having for tea. We're trying to move away from any distracting environmental factors. There might be a drill going on outside or a bit of a side conversation going on over there that's just taking our attention away, and we're moving away from that where we possibly can. And we're not mentally preparing those responses. We are just in it for the moment. Our body language, again, is very much showing that speaker that we are paying attention. We're nodding along at the right moment. We are having that open, inviting pose about us. And also we might be making some non-verbal but verbal comments, and just encourage the speaker to continue, and you will have your own way of doing that. We might smile, we might nod along, we might just use other appropriate facial expressions. Feedback's really important because we all have got to our point in our lives where we've had lots of different experiences. We will have been influenced by them. We will have lots of different values and different beliefs, different opinions, different ideas, and all of that can make what we hear, we can interpret it incorrectly because we're processing it through all those personal filters, whereas active listening is about really understanding somebody from their perspective, not from ours, but from theirs. So feedback is a way of checking that we've really understood what somebody said. So we might say things like, what I'm hearing is, and we're reflecting back whatever that speaker has said, or it sounds like you're saying ... And we might ask questions to clarify certain points. So is this what you mean? Or what do you mean when you say ... So we're really getting to the understanding of whatever that speaker is talking about. Quite often as well, if we are speaking to somebody who has been affected over the last 9 months or so around the pandemic and anything that's happened around it. And they've got very anxious, very worried, very concerned about the world. And maybe it's all been bottling up in their minds and they've been really struggling with that. Actually, when they do open up, it can come out in a massive jumble of emotions and feelings and everything that's been going on in their heads. And it can be quite hard to unpick some of that. So feedback, again, it's really important to pick out the important points and try and get to the nub of what it is that they mean. Don't judge. Again, we might have different opinions, different ideas than somebody else, and that may get quite jarring sometimes. It's really hard when we butt up against people who have very different opinions and values and beliefs to our own. Sometimes we can put aside our own feelings and our own beliefs and ideas and still speak to that person. But other times we need to recognize we're probably not the ideal person, because if what somebody is saying is making you angry or cross inside or emotional or upset, then actually you're not going to deal with it very well. So it's knowing when to finish that conversation for both of your sakes. And finally, it's responding appropriately. Active listening is very much a model of respect and understanding. You are trying to gain information from somebody, get their perspective and understand what it is that they mean. So responding in the way that you would want to be treated is absolutely at the heart of it. And being candid and open and honest in your response. If you can't do something or you even don't know what to do, there's no harm in saying that. When I teach mental health awareness and things like that, I do say, actually, sometimes it's good enough to say, I don't know what to say, but I'm here, or I'm going to see what I can do to help you. So responding appropriately. I'm going to give you a rest from my voice for a second, and I'm going to show you a short video on active listening that sums up some of those things that I said.
Many of us don't listen to other people. Instead, we just think and wait for our turn to express our own opinion. Take a step back and look at your colleagues' conversations. It's likely it'll look more like two monologues where everyone tells about themselves. The cure for it is active listening. It's a very powerful skill. It brings people closer, builds trust, and helps people to open up. Here are 5 steps on how to do it. 1. Stay focused. Keep natural eye contact, don't judge, and be patient. 2. Really listen. Don't think about your similar experiences and what you should tell next. 3. Allow for periods of silence. Wait till the other person speaks again. 4. From time to time, repeat the other person's words or paraphrase it back to them. It will reassure that you really listen and encourage them to open up. 5. Understand the emotions behind the words. When you paraphrase, also try to express the other feelings back to them. Active listening is rather difficult and can be more tiring than talking itself. Be prepared for long conversations. On the other hand, you will gain trust and people will simply like to spend time with you. You will also understand them much better. At the beginning, try it with your spouse or a good friend. You'll see how great they feel after talking to you. If you want to learn more about optimal lifestyle, subscribe to our channel below.
Okay, so that's a bit of a reminder on how we might actively listen. And it's something that absolutely practice at home with your partner, with anybody else in your family, or with friends that you may know really well, because it is a skill. It's a skill to learn. And I'll be absolutely honest, you do have to stop yourself from speaking sometimes, because when there is the tiniest of pauses, sometimes we feel that we need to fill them, or we pop in with what we think. But actually, if we do that, we've generally altered the thread of the conversation because it's gone in the direction that we've started to talk about. So leaving the silence there and leaving a little bit of a gap can be really useful for getting to the heart of somebody and what they're trying to say. Sadly, it wouldn't be appropriate to be talking about communications at the moment if I didn't talk about face coverings. It is part and parcel of life at the moment, and there are some simple things that we can do to enable communication to happen better whilst wearing face coverings. First of all, ensure people know who you are. I can't be the only person in the world who's walked past somebody I know in the supermarket or elsewhere who's wearing a face covering and I haven't even recognised them, because actually covering up such a big part of your face does make that difference. So ensure they know exactly who you are. Don't assume anything. Using your body language, your eye contact, your gestures is even more important whilst wearing a face covering, because they're missing your facial expression. And people say, I can tell you're smiling with your eyes. And yes, some people you can, but not everybody. You really can't see how they're feeling or what they're going through without facial expressions. And equally, they can't interpret you well either. Speaking loudly and clearly, it does muffle things, and remembering those, if you are doing those some non-verbal comments, there's to encourage people to continue, it's going to get lost behind your face covering because it is so muffled. So saying yes, no, etc., making sure it's heard. Use simple signs and gestures where you can to emphasize whatever point that you are making. Nodding or shaking your head. Give people time to respond, so back to those small pauses of silence. With facial expressions, you can tell if somebody's thinking, if they're about to speak again. You can see the intake of breath as they're going and thinking. You can't necessarily do that with face covering, so even more important that that is able to happen. And if we can, provide information in a written form, because people can misunderstand or misinterpret what we're saying. Which leads me neatly on to the final technique I want to talk to you about, which is a method called Teach Back. Teach Back came really from the medical community, where it was understood, or it's been understood, that when patients, individuals see health professionals, maybe doctors, nurses, pharmacists, those sort of individuals, those professionals, quite often they will just nod along with whatever's told to them, and they will look like they understand, and they'll go out of the room and they may go home and they'll go, I don't know what he meant, I don't quite know what I should do now, but I felt embarrassed to ask, or I didn't like to ask questions, I didn't like to look like I didn't understand. This kind of story is reflected in this example. So a woman was diagnosed with diabetes, and she went along to have a session with a nurse to learn how to inject insulin, a fairly normal and common practice. And with the nurse, they got the needle out and they learned how to do it using oranges. After a few goes, the woman, the patient, was quite happy. She knew what she was doing. The nurse was happy, and off they went. A while later, she became unwell and she was hospitalised, and upon admittance, they found out she was diabetic and asked her, have you been using your insulin? Yep, she said, absolutely I have. Do you want to talk us through how you've been doing that? Oh, yep, absolutely, just as the nurse showed me. I inject insulin into oranges and then I eat them. Of course, we all know, or we think we all know, that insulin isn't injected into people in that way, or it isn't administered in that way. But for whatever reason, that final step had either been miscommunicated, assumed, or missed for one reason or another. So Teach Back is a method of asking somebody to repeat to us what it is that we've told them, but using their own words so that we can really check their understanding and know that they are okay to move on and they know what to do next. So it says there, we summarise information in a clear way. We ask them to repeat it. Obviously not being patronising about it. We could ask questions like, so what are you going to do now? Or what are you going to do next? And that way we just make sure they've understood us properly. And obviously we repeat differently. I have seen it happen where somebody said something and communicated something the other person hasn't understood, and so it's communicated in exactly the same way. Well, if they didn't understand the first time, they're probably not going to understand the second time, so a different way of explaining is needed. So that's communication. Hopefully it's given you some tips and hints. I definitely recommend you try it. I do it. I practice it. We're at home. I have a very noisy, loud family who like to talk a lot. I'm sure it comes as no surprise to you. So it is really interesting to watch those conversations happening, and you can see people waiting for their turn, waiting to speak. Well, actually, as I said, you're not listening properly if you are doing that. So have a go and see how you get on. I'm going to move on to safeguarding, which is the second part of this session, and talk to you a little bit about what safeguarding is and what it means. Now, safeguarding is a broad term and it can refer to lots of different things and has different meanings to different people. Safeguarding can mean protecting money, protecting assets, protecting reputation. It can be protecting people of all sorts. In this instance, what I'm going to be talking about is safeguarding the adults that we are supporting, we're working with, in whatever shape or form that is. So safeguarding is about protecting people and understanding that some adults have what we call care and support needs, and because of them they may be more at risk than, say, me. At the moment in my life, and I say at the moment, I don't have any care and support needs. That could change. I could become vulnerable for whatever reason at any point today. Something could happen in my life that would make me that way. At the moment, though, that hasn't happened. I don't have those care and support needs, and I'm reasonably able to protect myself. But this is about protecting those who are at risk and who can't protect themselves as much. When we say care and support needs, what do we mean? Well, we mean a variety of different things. It could be somebody's physical health or some disabilities that they have. It could be somebody's mental health or mental well-being. They could be experiencing a lot of anxiety at the moment, understandably, given the situation, circumstances that people are living with. They could have depression. They could have lost all hope, not knowing what the future's going to be. And we've been in this state for a very long time. What's the future going to look like? People with care and support needs also may have drug and alcohol dependencies. That again means that they are more at risk and more vulnerable from other people who wish to do them harm. And finally, those with any sensory or cognitive or learning disabilities, by their nature, makes them more vulnerable. So that's what we mean. Why are they more at risk then? What circumstances do they live in that makes them more at risk? Well, quite often people with care and support needs have more restricted social environments. At the moment, they may not be seeing hardly anybody. It may well be that the only person that they see is the person who brings their shopping once a week, or it may be just the neighbours who are waving from across the road. And in that sense, they are highly dependent on other people. And as I said, unfortunately, we know that there are those who wish to exploit others who have disadvantages in some way or other. They may also be more welcoming of contact with people. And we know that isolation is a massive, crippling problem for people at the moment. And they may latch on to anybody who shows them any attention, or be so grateful for any support and care that's offered that they could find themselves in a bit of a problem. Finally, they might not conceive that somebody they know is abusing them. It might be a family member, it might be a parent, a child, a brother, a sister, an aunt, an uncle, whoever it may be. They might think, wow, it's just them, and they might find themselves quite trapped. We know that child abuse is very wrong. Society makes it perfectly clear that any abuse to children or any neglect and mistreatment of children won't be tolerated. It will be dealt with severely. However, with adults, it can be a lot more hidden, and it's not really spoken about as much in the news. And for people like us who see adults who have these care and support needs, or maybe more vulnerable because of the circumstances in which they're living, we may spot things, but maybe we don't know what to do about it, or how to report it, or who to turn to, or even if we need to be absolutely sure before we say anything. And equally, those individuals, those adults that we are working with, might be reluctant to seek help because they think, actually, if I tell on such and such, well, who's going to bring my shopping, or who am I going to chat to every week? That's my only person. So they might be quite scared of the consequences. But it is our job to make sure that the people that are most in need, most vulnerable, that we really do protect them. And hopefully this will come across this part of the message of the session, this message of, if you see something, please say something. You may be the only person that sees it. You maybe hold the piece of the jigsaw when it's all put together, makes one big picture that adult social care can work with and take action with. So what is abuse? What types of abuse is out there? Now, I am going to run through the different categories of abuse, and there are 10 categories of adults abuse. Now, this isn't said in a way that I expect you all to remember it, or you should know and be lookout for everything, or know what to do, or what the signs and symptoms are for everyone. But it is important that you understand the range of different abuse that's out there. And as I talk through it, I want you to think about, what are you more likely to see in your role? And it'll be different for everybody. There'll be some things you may be more likely to see than others. So have a think about those as I describe them. So first of all, we have physical abuse. That ranges from anything such as hitting, biting, pulling hair, breaking bones. It can also be misuse of medication. So it may be under or over medicating somebody for whatever reason. It causes physical harm to somebody else's body. Sexual abuse is from inappropriate looking and touching all the way through to rape. And as it is in children, it's also witnessing or acts of sexual acts or pornography that the adult has not consented to. So it includes that as well. Psychological, there's a whole load of things under psychological. You could also call it emotional. So it's messing with somebody's mind. It might be harassing someone, intimidating, coercing them into doing something that they don't want to do. Bullying, it covers cyberbullying as well. Threats, humiliation, all of those things come under psychological. Discriminatory is based on the 9 protected characteristics of the Equality Act. So it covers race, religion, disability, gender orientation, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, I should have said, sex, all of those things. And it's abusing somebody because they possess that protected characteristic. And finally, on that side, we have organisational. So that happens in care homes. It might be somebody living in very unhomely, very stark environments. Maybe they haven't got access to friends and family, to doctors, to money, to information even. It may well be as well doing things like sending everybody to bed at the same time and lights out, because that is easier for the organisation. It's taken away somebody's rights to live freely as they wish to do so. On the other side, we have domestic abuse. Domestic abuse is really any sort of abuse, but it covers those who are family members or those who are or have been intimate partners. And it does cover honour-based violence. So that's violence that happens when somebody does something that it's felt is not fitting with their culture or their religion or their beliefs. Modern slavery does happen in Staffordshire, sadly. It is people who are treated like slaves. Their papers are taken away from them. They generally don't get any money. They often live and work at the same place. They may be in factories, they may be in farms, on construction sites, maybe working in nail bars. There's domestic servitude that happens as well, where an individual will be kept as a slave in somebody's quite ordinary house sometimes. Financial and material is theft. It's as simple as that. There's no dressing it up. It could be somebody not being given their change from their shopping. It could be pressure in terms of money or inheritance or wills or property. Money going missing from house, assets going missing. All of those sorts of things are financial abuse. Neglect and acts of omission is when we're not looking after somebody's basic needs, really, their nutrition, their medication, their heating in their house. All of those sorts of things come under neglect. Even under neglect is our sensory aids. So if somebody needs glasses or a hearing aid or a walking frame in order to live a normalish life, then if we are not providing that for them, that is neglect. The final category is self-neglect. Self-neglect is a tricky one because self-neglect is about somebody not looking after themselves to the extent that they are going to cause real physical harm to themselves or anybody else. And really, we will only, adult social care will only take action if that's the case. And we know there's lots of self-neglect that goes on that is at a much lower threshold than that. And there's other support that we can pop in for people who are struggling in those sorts of ways. But it does really have to reach the threshold of serious harm or risk of death before we can take action. So those are the 10 categories of abuse. Hopefully, as I went through them, you will have picked up on 1, 2, 3, maybe half a dozen types of abuse that you're more likely to see in your role. And it's just about keeping an eye out for it, making sure that that person is safe, asking them sometimes, are you okay? You've got this volunteer befriender coming to bring your shopping. Is it going all right? Does he give you all your change? You can ask those questions. Be curious. Ask somebody that you're concerned about. Okay, I'm going to show you a short video now. Again, give you a little bit of a rest from my voice, which hopefully, just get rid of that, will show you some of those and how they could look, some of those categories of abuse. It is written by Cornwall Council, so we do have some rather nice scenes to begin the video.
Everyone has the right to live their lives free from violence, fear, and abuse. But not everyone can protect themselves from harm or exploitation.
I can't do things anymore.
I won't be back for 2 days. You'll be alright, won't you? You'll be alright, won't you?
This is no life. Please let me die.
I work hard. I deserve a little treat. He won't notice.
She never gives me my change.
You Klingon.
Weirdo.
You waste of space.
He's a freak.
You spacker. You moron.
It's our little secret.
If you
Say something.
Say something.
Okay, so I think that video highlights some of the ways that obviously people are abused, and what we can do, and it was up to us really to obviously say something if we do see something. Yeah, I agree, Amanda. I've shown that video many times in my career of delivering training, and I still find it difficult to watch. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I really do. But we can do something about it, and that is the point of highlighting it. So I definitely ask you to, if you see something, as I say something. Just got something in the chat there. I can't just open it. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so what can we do, or how can we respond to somebody who tells us that they're being abused? So what would we do? And it can be quite difficult to hear from people. First of all, we'd show that we're listening, so using those active listening skills that I talked about earlier, and show them that we're believing what they're saying. Some people are frightened that they might not be taken seriously, that nobody will really understand or follow what they're saying. Staying calm can be difficult. It can be quite distressing to hear those sorts of stories from people. But if we can show that calmness, and that we might be obviously quite upset by it, but just being there for that person. We do have to tell somebody, we really do. It's important that we go on to say something. We can never promise to keep it a secret. We can never promise not to say anything. It doesn't matter if it's a child, if it's an adult, whoever it is, we have to tell them. And we have to be a bit honest about it. Because if we tell somebody, oh, I won't tell anyone, but we go ahead and do it, we've broken that trust in us, and that trust that they've placed in us. It's a really big trust that they've placed in us to tell us such a thing, and such a thing that's happened to them. So we do have to say. Allow them to continue at their own pace, take their time, again, allowing for those pauses. It's not our job to investigate, absolutely not. This is not where we would start asking all those open questions, because our only job in this is to listen and refer. That is it. That is the end of the story. We don't need to know if it's happening. We don't need any proof. We don't need evidence. We don't need to be sure ourselves. We simply listen. We pass it on. We'll only ever ask questions if we've not quite understood what they've said. Tell them they've done the right thing. People can feel very ashamed. They can feel guilty if they're going to get somebody in trouble, particularly if it's somebody that they love or somebody they care about. They have done the right thing. Tell them what you're going to do next and who you're going to share the information with. That's really important, partly from that trust, as I already said, but also because somebody might be quite worried about who is going to support me now. If that's my only lifeline to the world, or one of my few lifelines to the world, what am I going to do? But tell them, I will help you. I will make sure that you are safe, that you are still supported. We will find someone else to help you. So what can you say? I'm taking this seriously. I'm listening. Obviously, you'd paraphrase that in your own words, but absolutely, whatever your own personal beliefs are, assumptions or thoughts about the thing that they're telling you, you do say that. Thank them for telling you it's a hard thing for someone to open up about. It's not your fault. Again, that guilt might eat into somebody. I will help you. I will stay with you. I will support you. Don't say, why didn't you tell anyone before? That's not really helpful, even if you think it, even if you thought, actually, it's been going on for 30 years. Why haven't you ever spoken about it before? There's no point in saying that. I can't believe it, even if you know people in the alleged abuse. Still, you wouldn't say that. Or are you sure it's true? Any of those open questions, as I've already said, and never make false promises. So obviously, hopefully you would know you'd call from help, from necessary, from emergency services. That could be the police if necessary, if you're worried about somebody's immediate safety, or medical attention if they need it. Ensure that they're safe to continue before you walk away from there. That may again involve calling the police. It may involve calling adult social care. Tell them that they're going to be supported, and report it as soon as possible, because again, those personal filters that we all have, they can make us remember things inaccurately or not quite well. So making sure that you've said it as soon as you possibly can. Obviously, don't promise not to tell anyone. Don't be judgmental. Don't contact anyone. That's not your job. And don't touch or move anything. If you've walked into a situation where something has very recently happened, then all you need to do is close the room to wherever it happened. Let the police do their job. It's not a good idea to go and bag things up because you might think it's useful for the police. Just leave them to their job. So that's if somebody's told you. If you suspect, if you're worried about somebody, you still would report it. You don't have to know. You don't have to be sure. What you do have to do is take action and make sure that you report it in. You could do it if you have an organisation, if that's your role and you have a designated safeguarding lead, that's somebody you can talk to. If you're not in that sort of role or don't have that organisation behind you, just ring adult social care and tell them your concerns and your worries. Those are the telephone numbers. So that top number is for Staffordshire only. It does operate Monday to Friday office hours, but there is an emergency out of hours number that you would need if you're worried about somebody's immediate safety. You wouldn't necessarily ring that if something had happened a few months ago and you weren't particularly concerned about that person's immediate safety. You could leave that till Monday morning if it was at the weekend, for example, but you would use it if you were more concerned. There are similar numbers available in Stoke-on-Trent if the person that you're supporting lives within Stoke-on-Trent, and also numbers for children. Now, when I showed you in session 1 where you would find information about safety, all of those numbers are there, so you can find them that way as well. These ones specifically are for adult social care in Staffordshire. So I suppose we're just drawing to a close now. What I'd want you to do following this is just reflect 5 minutes after we leave the call and just think, what scenarios might you come across in your situation? Where would you report it into? What are your organisation procedures if you are part of an organisation? Or just have those numbers to hand. If it is that you're more likely to see people in Stoke-on-Trent, or indeed if it's children, just go and have a search for them now so you've got those numbers and you're able to do something. Because as I said right at the beginning of this part of the session, it is important that we are on the lookout for those people who are most unable to protect themselves from those who wish to do them harm.